So for my presentation, I chose Dunkirk. The movie came out in 2017 for my ethical issue. So a little bit of background. The actual Battle of Dunkirk was a failed attempt by British forces to stop Germany spreading through France and reaching the Channel. So they were unable to stop the Germans. So they had to wait on the beaches, as you can see in that picture, for destroyers to come up and pick them up. The destroyers weren't able to pick them up because, first of all, it was too shallow for them to come in, and also the German air forces started bombing the destroyers as soon as they got there. So what the British did was they had small civilian ships come through and pick up the soldiers as they waited. And the film kind of follows this evacuation, not necessarily the battle, but just the evacuation. So it follows one guy who's waiting on the beach to be picked up, and then it follows a father and son who take their civilians, who take their ship and go and pick up some troops, and then it follows a British Air Force fighter who fights the German Air Forces. So this movie is full of ethical dilemmas. I could have chosen, there's 30 options to choose from probably. One of them is disobeying orders. That's constant throughout the film. It's a point of panic and just doing whatever it takes to survive. So privates are constantly disobeying their generals and just doing whatever they can to get on these ships and get off the beach. Then there's a huge issue of sacrifice throughout the movie. A great example of this is the pilot that the movie follows. He's shooting down the German bombers, and then he only has enough gas to make it back to Britain. So he turns around, and then he sees another German bomber coming in, so he decides to turn back around and use his gas fighting him, and ends up landing on the beach and being captured by the Germans. So it was an issue of sacrifice. But the dilemma that I decided to choose for this presentation was the issue of nationality. This is one of the real issues that gets resolved throughout the film. It kind of progresses. And it's one that we don't really think about that often. So one little clip here. This shows kind of how the British were only really concerned about their own soldiers, and even though they came to help the French, they wouldn't let them get on the ships. Here's a little clip.
No French, English only. You've got your own ships, this is a British ship. Get the stretchers through, there's stretchers coming. Get out of the way! That's 2 minutes. You've missed it. Missed it.
So in that clip, we can see the British troops are. It's actually interesting because they miss the timer to get on the ship, so they shouldn't even be allowed. But the officer lets them in because they're British. But even though the French were there, they waited. They were there on time. He wouldn't let them on just because they're French. He says you have their own ships. You're gonna have to wait for them. So this issue of nationality and kind of does nationality matter more than overall humanity is current throughout the film. Here's another clip of probably the most ethical part of the whole film. Ooh.
This one. He's a German spy. Don't be daft. Have you noticed he hasn't said a word?
Sure daft. Tell him.
Yeah. Tell me, Gibson. Tell me! Tell him, for God's sake! Austin. This was once a frog. A bloody frog. A cowardly little keel-jumping frog. He was just looking for a way off the sand like the rest of us.
So in that clip, it's kind of hard to understand what's going on out of context, but so they're on a boat and it's sinking. So one of them has to jump off in order for it to float because it's too heavy. And so this German guy, frog means French, I don't know why, but this German guy, or French guy, he doesn't talk at all because he can't speak English, but he stole a British uniform so he could get on the boat with them. And so you can see that Harry Styles there, the guy with the gun, he says that this one, he thinks he's a German spy, so he should jump off the boat. But then he realizes that he's French, and it doesn't really seem to change his perception of him at all. He's still, is pointing the gun at him, still wants him to jump off. But then the other guy, the main character, he says, he's just like the rest of us. He was just trying to find a way to get off. And I think this kind of really sums up the whole issue of nationality versus humanity. There are some people who said, hey, we're helping the French, we're here, let's do whatever we can to help them. And then there's other people who say, yes, we are helping the French, but we're helping them to help ourselves. We're stopping them in France so the Germans won't be able to make it to England. And so when we only have enough boats, or when we only have space, we'll just send the British, and the French can figure out how they're going to save themselves. But then this issue is kind of resolved in the end of the film. Here's a last little clip.
Come on, Private! I know we're officers, but it's us or the enemy!
So far, I'm staying for the French.
So in that last video, that was the same doc that we saw in the beginning where the French were trying to get on, and that was a captain. He was the last British officer. It was his turn to leave, but he decides to stay and help coordinate the French get off the beach. So you can see that this kind of dilemma of should we let the French in with our own people is kind of resolved. But at the same time, it's still kind of an issue because, as you'll notice, all the British have left, and it's just the French remaining. And so, yes, they do put, they say, okay, now let's just put aside our differences and just take everyone, but it's after all the British have left. But still kind of resolved, and here are my references for the presentation, and thank you. That's it.